The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it wasn't addressed to me. It was waiting in my attorney's inbox, forwarded automatically by the Fulton County Family Court. And it told him, in precise legal language, that a petition had been filed to have me declared mentally incompetent. My husband had signed it. My brother had signed it. And while I spent that Tuesday morning chairing a budget review for 400 hospital beds in downtown Atlanta, the two men I trusted most in the world were already 3 months deep into a plan to take everything I had ever built. Here is what they didn't account for. My attorney called me first. My name is Margaret Ellison. I'm 51 years old. I've spent the last 18 years as a regional hospital administrator in Georgia, managing a budget that most people would find staggering and a staff that would exhaust anyone who didn't genuinely love the work. I run a big operation. I make hard decisions every single day. I grew up in Gaffney, South Carolina, the eldest of 4 kids. My mother cleaned rooms at a roadside motel until her knees gave out. My father was there until I was 9, and then he wasn't. I mention this not for sympathy, but because it is the foundation of everything that comes later. I learned very early that the only person you can fully count on is the one looking back at you from a mirror. I got a scholarship for pre-law, became a paralegal, then an attorney, moved into healthcare administration because I realized the hospital system was one of the most legally complex environments in the country, and most of the people running it had never read a contract in full. I made myself useful. I became indispensable. And along the way, quietly and without fanfare, I invested. Not in things I didn't understand. Property, 1 unit at a time. A duplex at 32. A 4-unit complex at 36. A small commercial strip at 40. By 50, I owned 6 residential rental properties, 2 commercial buildings, and a storage facility outside Marietta that paid me every month without drama. None of it was glamorous. All of it was in my name alone. My mother never said a word to me about that strategy. She just modeled it in the worst possible way. She signed everything over to a man who disappeared. I made a promise to myself at 9 years old that I would never repeat her mistake. I should tell you about Garrett. Garrett Ellison is a handsome, socially graceful man with enormous confidence and a complicated relationship with follow-through. We met at a charity gala when I was 37. He was a commercial real estate broker, and the way he described his work made it sound like building empires. The truth, which emerged slowly over many years, was that Garrett was extraordinarily good at entering rooms and deeply uncomfortable with leaving them with anything concrete to show for it. 4 businesses. 14 years of marriage. Not one survived past year 2. I funded 3 of them. I believed in him. I thought the right support, the right runway, would eventually produce something real. It didn't. By year 8, Garrett had stopped launching new ventures. He settled into managing my rental properties, handling contractors and maintenance calls, receiving a salary from the portfolio. He drove a beautiful truck. He played golf 3 mornings a week. He seemed, on the surface, to have arrived at some kind of peace with the life we had constructed together. What I did not know, what I had no reason to suspect, was that during those quiet, ordinary weeknights when I was working past midnight on hospital contracts while Garrett watched television 2 rooms away, he was also having very different conversations with his sister. Planning sessions, patient sessions, sessions about timing. I know that now. I didn't know it then. The call from David Parrish came on a Tuesday morning in October. David has been my estate attorney for 11 years. He is precise, measured, and entirely uninterested in alarm unless alarm is genuinely warranted. When his name appeared on my screen at 9 in the morning, I stepped out of the budget meeting without a word of explanation. He told me to sit down. The Fulton County Family Court had forwarded his office a formal notification regarding a conservatorship petition filed in my name. The petition alleged that I had been experiencing significant cognitive decline, erratic financial behavior, and an increasing inability to manage my personal affairs. It included a psychiatric evaluation signed by a doctor Arnold Clef, documenting a clinical assessment supposedly conducted at my Atlanta residence in the third week of September. The petition named a proposed conservator, my brother Dennis. The lead petitioner was my husband, Garrett. I remember placing my hand flat against the hallway wall outside the conference room, not because my legs were unsteady, because my mind was running very fast and I needed something solid to orient against while it moved. Dennis, my younger brother, whom I had helped through 2 years of community college. The same man I lent $17,000 when his truck was repossessed and he had no way to get to work. The same person I had seated at my Thanksgiving table every single year of his adult life, always without conditions, always without making it feel like a ledger entry. He had signed a sworn declaration stating that his sister was mentally unfit to manage her own finances, and Garrett had built the case and submitted it to a court. David explained the timeline. The hearing was set for 30 days from the filing date. I had 29 days. I asked one question. In Georgia, could a court-ordered conservatorship give Dennis authority over property held solely in my name? David's pause before he answered was its own answer. Under certain conditions, he said, yes. A judge who finds that an individual lacks capacity can grant a conservator broad authority over individually held assets. Margaret, if this petition succeeds, Dennis would be positioned to petition for the sale or transfer of your properties. I thanked him and told him I would be in his office by noon. I returned to the conference room and I finished the budget meeting. I sent 4 emails that needed sending, and then I cleared my afternoon and drove to see my attorney. I need you to tell me something right now before we go any further. Leave one word in the comments below, just the word trust. Leave it if you have ever extended your complete loyalty to someone and had them use it against you. I want to know how many of us are in that same room. I'll read every single one. I did not fall apart on the drive to David's office. I want to be specific about that because I think betrayal of this scale is assumed to produce immediate collapse. It did not. What it produced was a very particular kind of operational clarity. The same thing that happens in a hospital during a crisis when 19 departments are looking at me for direction. Everything personal exits the building and something precise and cold takes its place. On the drive, I checked every financial account I had remote access to. Our joint savings account, which I funded at a consistent balance of around $230,000 for household liquidity, was sitting at $44,000. $186,000 had left that account over the previous 14 months. Consistent transfers, carefully spaced, each size to avoid automatic flags. Every single one routed to an external account I had never seen before. I wrote the account number down in my notes app and kept driving. David had already done preliminary research by the time I arrived. His paralegal laid the court documents on the conference table, and I read the psychiatric evaluation in its entirety. Dr. Arnold Clef had assessed me, according to his report, at my Atlanta residence during the third week of September. He documented memory lapses, inability to recall recent financial decisions, paranoid ideation regarding close family members, and a marked decline from my prior level of cognitive functioning. In the third week of September, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, attending a week-long hospital accreditation conference at the Marriott Uptown. I had a conference badge with my name and employer printed on it. I had 52 emails time-stamped from that city. I had a hotel receipt, a conference program with my handwritten session notes in the margins, and a photograph of me presenting at a Friday afternoon breakout session on regulatory compliance. I had never been in the same room as Arnold Clef. Not once. Not ever. David said what I had already concluded. This evaluation is a fabrication. Someone paid this man to produce a clinical document about a patient he never examined and to submit it to a court of law. That is not a civil matter. That is criminal fraud. I said, David, 29 days. Tell me exactly what we need. He authorized a forensic accountant immediately. a woman named Patricia Aucaffer, whom he had used on prior engagements and whose work he trusted completely. I approved the engagement on the spot. I want you to stay with me here, because a little while from now, I'm going to tell you exactly what Patricia found when she pulled the license records for the doctor who signed my psychiatric evaluation. That detail changed the entire legal category of what Garrett had done. But first, I need to tell you about Vivian. Garrett's older sister, Vivian Ellison Marsh, had never warmed to me. Not from the beginning of my relationship with her brother. Not through the early years of our marriage. Not through 14 years of dinners and holidays and family occasions where I arrived with bottles of wine I selected carefully and gifts I thought about in advance. Vivian believed, and I think she believed it sincerely, that Garrett's primary asset in the world was his proximity to my wealth. And that, with the right mechanism, that wealth could be redirected into the family. I had read her coolness as ordinary protective jealousy. The older sister watching her brother marry a woman who outturns him by a factor that stings his pride. I was wrong about what it was. Patricia Aucaffer came back to me in 48 hours. The $186,000 had been transferred from our joint savings account to a personal checking account held by Vivian Ellison Marsh. Every transfer, 14 months, her account, from Vivian's account, the deposits had been forwarded within days of each receipt to a newly incorporated LLC registered in Delaware. The LLC was named Garrison Property Group, Garrison being Vivian's married name. She was the sole managing member. Garrison Property Group had been incorporated 8 months ago. It held no properties yet, but it had active letters of intent on 2 commercial buildings. Both of them were in neighborhoods where I owned properties. The same corridors, the same zip codes, the same tenant profile. The structure became immediately clear when I saw it laid out on paper. Garrett drains the joint account to fund Vivian. Vivian builds the legal vehicle. Dennis takes the conservatorship. And Dennis, as my court-authorized conservator, begins selling or transferring my buildings at whatever price Garrett and Vivian specify directly into Garrison Property Group. My portfolio becomes their portfolio through a court order. They engineered on fraudulent psychiatric testimony. I had been funding the careers and living expenses of 3 people who were simultaneously building the mechanism to take everything from me. I had to sit with that for a moment. I am telling you that because I don't want to perform composure I didn't feel. The math of that realization is something you feel before you process it intellectually. At this point, David sat back from the conference table and said, "Margaret, we have enough. Your conference records conclusively prove the evaluation is a fabrication. Patricia's audit documents the financial motive and the transfer trail to Vivian's account. I can file an emergency motion to dismiss the conservatorship petition with prejudice and have this thrown out before the scheduled hearing date. No Georgia judge will allow this petition to stand. I can have the motion filed by end of week." For exactly 4 seconds, I allowed myself to feel what that sounded like. The sense that the worst was already behind me, that the petition would collapse and the criminal charges would follow and the immediate crisis was over. Then David's paralegal knocked on the conference room door. She placed a single printed page on the table in front of us. David read it first. I watched his expression shift in a way I had not seen in 11 years of working together. He pushed the page across to me. It was a license verification report from the Georgia Composite Medical Board. The report confirmed that Dr. Arnold Cleff had held an active psychiatry license in the state of Georgia until 14 months ago, at which point his license was revoked. The documented reasons were falsification of patient records and inappropriate financial arrangements with referring legal counsel. The Georgia Medical Board had stripped his credentials and referred the matter to the district attorney's office. He had not been a licensed physician for 14 months. I looked at the date of the first transfer from our joint savings account to Vivian's account. 14 months ago, not after, not before. The same calendar month. The month Garrett signed on a disgraced, unlicensed psychiatrist to fabricate a mental evaluation was the same month he began systematically bleeding our savings account to fund his sister's shell company. One plan, one start date, 14 months of coordinated criminal patience. I need you to tell me right now, in the comments, Team Margaret or Team They Deserve Everything That's Coming. Because what I did in the next 72 hours, some people in my life called ruthless. I want to know exactly where you stand before I tell you what happened at the dinner table. I need to back up by 3 days, because there is something Garrett did not know. The morning after David's first call, before I had met with Patricia, before I had the license report, I had made a single phone call to an estate planning attorney named Rebecca Cho. I had used Rebecca twice in prior years when establishing my original property structures. I told her I needed an irrevocable trust established as quickly as legally possible, and that I needed it able to receive deed transfers for multiple properties before any conservatorship order could theoretically be entered. Rebecca worked through the night. I signed documents in 3 sessions over 2 days, between meetings, between hospital calls, in a law office conference room at 7 in the morning before my normal workday started. By the time David received the license verification report, every property I owned had been legally transferred into an irrevocable trust. David Parrish was named trustee. No conservatorship order in any jurisdiction has authority over assets held in an irrevocable trust. Not in Georgia, not anywhere in the United States. I had moved everything in 72 hours. That evening, I drove home. Garrett was in the kitchen. He had made dinner. The table was set for 2. There was a bottle of wine open on the counter and music coming from the small speaker on the windowsill. He greeted me at the door with the ordinary smile he had been giving me for 14 years and asked how my day was. I said long. I sat down at the table. I poured myself a glass of water, and I looked at my husband across a candlelit dinner in a house that was legally mine. I said, "Garrett, who is Arnold Clef?" It was a very small reaction. A fraction of a second of perfect stillness before the expression reset. He said he didn't know the name. I told him that was interesting because the Georgia Composite Medical Board knew it very well. The Fulton County Family Court had it on record. And Patricia Ackhafer had documented precisely what he had paid to that man, from which account, and on what date, for a psychiatric evaluation that the doctor had no legal standing to perform or sign. The smile left his face. I did not stop there. I told him about Vivian's personal account, about Garrison Property Group, about the $186,000, about the letters of intent on properties neighboring mine. I told him that David Parrish was, at that moment, preparing an emergency motion to dismiss the conservatorship petition and a formal criminal complaint to the Fulton County District Attorney for fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and wire transfer theft. And then I told him the one thing he had spent 14 months failing to account for. I said, "Garrett, I transferred every deed into an irrevocable trust 3 days ago. David is the trustee. There is nothing a conservatorship order can reach. There is nothing left to take." What happened to his face in that moment is not something I can describe as dramatic. It was the opposite of dramatic. It was the quiet, total collapse of a man whose entire plan had just been confirmed useless in his own kitchen by the person he spent a year and a half trying to outmaneuver. He said I had no right, that he had sacrificed his career for this marriage, that I had always kept him out, always treated our finances like they were mine alone, and that what he had done was a response to years of feeling like an outsider in his own life. I let him finish. Then I said, very quietly, "Garrett, if you genuinely believed this marriage was unfair, you had 14 years and every possible avenue to say so. You could have asked for mediation. You could have filed for divorce. Instead, you paid a disgraced doctor for a fabricated psychiatric document, filed a court petition to have me declared mentally incompetent, and stole $186,000 from our savings account to build a real estate company in your sister's name using my portfolio as the acquisition target. You did not do any of that because you felt trapped in an unfair marriage. You did it because you believed I was too focused on my work to look down. He had no answer for that. I stood up, picked up my phone and my keys, and walked out of the house. The conservatorship petition was dismissed with prejudice at the emergency hearing 8 days later. It took the judge less than 20 minutes. David presented my Charlotte conference records and the hotel documentation from September, which conclusively proved I was not in Atlanta on the dates of the alleged evaluation. He presented Dr. Cleff's medical board revocation records, establishing that the signatory had no legal standing to conduct or document any medical assessment. He presented Patricia's complete forensic audit, tracing the transfers from our joint account to Vivian's personal account to the Delaware LLC. The judge issued a formal rebuke from the bench, stating that fraudulent conservatorship filings represented one of the most deliberate abuses of the family court system he had witnessed in his tenure, and he referred the matter directly to the district attorney's office. Dr. Arnold Cleff was arrested within 2 weeks on charges of fraud and conspiracy. The district attorney's office had been separately building a case against him based on his license revocation, and his cooperation in the Garrison matter reduced his sentence. He served time and lost what remained of his professional standing permanently. Garrett was indicted on wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and grand theft. The forensic audit left no credible defense. His attorney attempted to characterize the transfers as informal marital asset management. The email correspondence between Garrett and Vivian, which the DA subpoenaed, described the scheme in terms that made that argument impossible to sustain. He was convicted. He received 4 years in federal prison and a restitution order for the full amount transferred. Vivian's LLC was frozen pending civil litigation. The letters of intent on the neighboring properties became worthless. She was named as a civil defendant and settled for a figure I accepted. Dennis cooperated with prosecutors within 48 hours of being contacted. He gave prosecutors a complete account of how Garrett and Vivian had approached him, explained the plan, and offered him a fee for serving as my conservator. His cooperation reduced his criminal exposure, though it did not eliminate it. He faced misdemeanor charges for signing a fraudulent court declaration under oath. We have not spoken since the arrest. My divorce was finalized 11 months after that dinner table conversation. Georgia recognizes marital fault. When your husband is convicted of federal wire fraud in a scheme targeting your personal assets, fault is not difficult to establish. Garrett left the marriage with the furniture he had moved into a rented apartment before sentencing and a conviction record that will follow every financial application he makes for the rest of his professional life. The irrevocable trust remains in place. David remains the trustee. There is a letter I keep in my desk at home, not the court order, not the conviction record, the original notification, the one that arrived in David's inbox on a Tuesday in October and that he forwarded to me in a PDF while I was standing in a hospital hallway with my hand pressed flat against a wall. I kept it because I never want to lose contact with what it felt like to read it for the first time. Not the rage, which came later. Not the grief, which also came later. The specific cold clarity that preceded both of those things. The moment I understood what had been built against me and made the immediate, quiet decision to move faster than they expected. I need to say something honest before we get to the end. I was wrong about Dennis for a very long time. I chose to see in him what I wanted to see, a younger brother who needed guidance, someone who would carry forward the memory of what I had done for him as a form of loyalty. I believed that consistent, unconditional generosity produces that kind of bond in a person. It does not always, and I want you to sit with that, not because your situation looks exactly like mine, but because I think a lot of you understand what it means to extend real care to someone who returned it with something smaller and more calculated than you deserved. Loyalty cannot be bought with kindness. It has to be freely chosen or it means nothing at all. That is the hardest lesson this entire experience produced, and it cost me no money in the end, but it cost me something that money cannot replace. I am 53 years old now. I still run the hospital network. I own 11 properties as of this year, adding 2 more after the divorce was finalized, in markets I chose without asking anyone's opinion or waiting for anyone's approval. I give monthly to a Georgia legal aid organization that provides free representation to victims of elder financial abuse and conservatorship fraud. The attorneys fighting those cases deserve every resource they can get. That letter from the Tuesday morning sits in my desk drawer. On the days when I am tempted to trust too quickly, or extend more than I should, or let love make me careless with the life I worked 20 years to build, I open that drawer. And I remember exactly what it costs to be the kind of woman who chooses to fight back. If you stayed with me all the way to this moment, you already know this story hit different. Hit the like button if you believe every single one of them got exactly what they deserved. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about people who refuse to disappear quietly. And leave me something real in the comments. Tell me about the moment in a relationship when you knew, even before you let yourself admit it, that something was wrong. I read every single one and I respond.